Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, I'm Matt with Duke's Models, and this is the Flankoff. Hello, and welcome to whatever number installment this is of the Flankoff. I really don't know because I've got footage for several installments shot, but not edited yet. But the exhaust painting process was going a bit long, so I figured I would stop it and break in here where we're getting ready to start on the heat staining, which is the blues and violets and things like that you see on the exhaust pedals and various other elements of the exhaust and the heat shields. So here it is with all of the various paint elements on it. Starting from the back and working our way forward, we've got all kinds of various Mr. Paint metallizers going on here. We've got everything from steel and dark aluminum to titanium, anodized aluminum, bronze, copper, burnt iron, etc. We've got some Sakura Pigma micron pens that did some helpful markings up in here that have since been obscured by a mix of Mr. Paint steel and black, with a bit of burnt iron kind of dusted on top just to warm it up a little bit. So there's a lot in terms of layering that's going on here. Now we get to go ahead and put those blues and violets and things on top. And while I definitely intend to use, various clears like the MRP blue and violet, obviously, there's a lot more character going on an Su-35 in terms of the exhaust than just two tones. If you look at the reference photos of these things, they are all over the place. And so I want to represent that as best as I can, and I think the best way to do that is with oils. So let's meet some of our players. Slide this guy out of the way. Alright, so on the blue and turquoise and green range, we've got, I'm using essentially a mix of ABT 502, Winsor & Newton, and I've got one tube of Lucas oils that are also going to be playing a role here. So this is copper oxide blue. It's a nice patina type shade. And we can crack it open. It looks like that. Maybe not quite as vibrant as I would like, but we don't necessarily need vibrant in every single thing we're doing here. So got that. We have the much more vibrant fantasy line Turquoise Lights, which sounds like a bad late night David Hasselhoff series or something. I guess I'm thinking of Baywatch Nights, but yes, nice and vibrant and gaudy, just perfect for this. Moving into the others, so we've got this very pricey Series 4 Winsor & Newton Cobalt Turquoise Light. We've got another, Series 1 of Phthalo Turquoise. I'm not even going to try to get that right. Yeah. It's a darker turquoise. There you go. And then finally we've got this Lucas Turquoise, which it's not really showing up for me on the monitor, but I'm going to hope the camera catches how vibrant at least the label of this thing is. So let's go ahead and take a quick peek. That is pretty damn saturated, so that'll be nice to use. Now we've also got, moving into the various magentas and things like that, we have a nice Series 2 here, Quina Credone. Jesus, these are not the best, but it's a magenta. Then we've got a darker basic magenta, and we have an ultramarine violet. So these are the three in sort of that pink violet range. Now, just for kicks, we are also going to be maybe pulling in, I'm not sure yet, ABT faded white, which is, a good lightening agent to kind of balance things out a bit. So let's go ahead and start putting some oils onto our super fancy palette, a piece of cardboard that I cut off of a shipping box. Now, my favorite way to do this, to not use up too much oil and to keep the threads so they're easy to come back to and close and the things don't get clogged over time, it is toothpicks. So first up, faded white. This will be the most exciting part of the video, is watching me squeeze oil out of tubes. So I just squeeze a little bit out. Use the toothpick to kind of cut it and place it where it needs to go. Let's sit there so it can leach out for a little bit. Let's do our Ultramarine Violet. God damn it. I hate when they're all oily and they just kind of spurt out like this, but gotta do something with it, right? Alright, come on. Take that guy off of all of that oil. That might help a little bit. These are, as you can tell, very strong tones. I'm going to pause the camera for a few minutes and let these kind of leach in, and then we're going to come back and start playing. Okay, so it's time to start playing around with oils. And looking at photos of the exhaust cans on the Su-35, they're all over the map. So, you know, here is an example where we have, for the most part, they are slightly tinged, and then we've got one that's just, whoa, way blue. But then we go to these, and it's like, these are all blue, and then we've got blue and violet in here, blue, 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 you know, crazy. Then you get to the underside, and holy shit, look at that. You know, blue, violet, blue, blue, violet, all over the place. You know, we can even come up here, you can see, you know, there's a lot of very minor shifts going on. We want to take a light hand for the most part with all of these because we don't want to overdo things. But there's definitely some staining that we need to pay attention to. You know, zoom in close on this, you can see there's a lot of blue in there. A lot more blue than there is violet per se. But we do not want to ignore the violet either. So let's get to it. Now for this beginning part, I'm going to focus, I guess, on the exhaust cans. I don't know. And I'm going to be using a fairly fine pointed brush here. This is a Qualita Punto 40. And to apply it, because we only need a tiny, tiny little bit of paint, I'm going to be using an airbrush needle to get some paint on there. Let's go ahead and dot, dot, and dot right there. And then you just come in here. I like working with oils when they're a bit more dry, so it's easier to go back and undo this than it is to try to wipe too much away from them. A little bit more, switch up the shades just a tiny little bit. Also trying to remember that I'm going to be putting clears on top of these. The hardest part of this is seeing it in the glare from the lights. And we're going to move up here just a tiny little bit. have that one be kind of lighter. I think that might be too much. Yeah, it's too much. So we can go ahead and carry some of that up to here. We've got some blue going down there. It's looking pretty solid. So I'm going to pause this so you're not watching me just dab little bits of oil all over this, and we'll come back when it's a little bit further along. Okay, so we're back after having some fun with oils, and here's where we have ended up. Some multicolored heat staining going on. Some of it a bit more intense, some of it a bit more subtle. Flip it over here. And it's looking pretty good. Now this is the part where it gets tricky because, again, you look at the reference photos, some of these things, they're just pockmarked and littered with heat staining. Others, not so much. So I tried to strike, maybe leaning more towards the lots of heat staining, but not quite as uniform. So happy where we're at. Gonna let this set up overnight and then come back tomorrow when we can play with our clears. All right, now that I've applied various oils to the exhaust to get the heat staining effect started, it's time to traffic in some clears. Now, historically, I have used Allclad's various hot metal clears for this purpose. As you can see, some test work that went into the Kitty Hawk stalking horse, in here and whatnot. Now, I really, really like the look of the Allclad hot metal clears, the hot metal blue and hot metal violet and whatnot. The problem is, even though they are clear and thin, they spray like absolute shit. I don't know why, but they really seem to sort of hold into the airbrush. They have a certain frictive quality to them that doesn't really make sense considering they're basically a clear lacquer. But that is the way it is. So instead of relying on those, I am going to go ahead and play with some Mr. Paint clears. Now, I've done a bit of this in some tests, and I used, for example, their burnt metal blue, which has, you can see down here, some metallic qualities to it. This is also a lot darker and a lot bluer, essentially, than I was really looking for. And the guys at Mr. Paint were good enough to recommend maybe I just try their regular clears. So that is exactly what we're going to be doing with a selection of 4 clears. So we've got good old MRP clear blue right here. And to kind of lighten it and get us towards some of that turquoise stuff where we want it to be, we've got a bit of green that we can mix in there. And we've got violet. And last but not least, well, maybe least for these purposes, red, brown, clear. So this is more of that sort of, this I guess would be the equivalent of the Allclad hot metal sepia. Now, one thing about Mr. Paint's clears, as you can see kind of in here, they're a little bit thicker, or I won't say thicker is the right word, maybe a little bit more opaque than some other clears that are out there. So I think they can actually take thinning a little bit, which might also make them spray even more delicately. So I am going to go ahead and fire up the airbrush, put a bit of thinner through it just to make sure it's in a happy place, and then we will get to it. Okay, so I just loaded up some Mr. Paint Red Brown Clear, thinking it might be a good base coat, just like a nice transparent brown. But check out what happens when you spray it. You basically get copper. That is a shade I don't really want to be going towards. So I don't think we're going to be using that. Instead, maybe for that grunginess that I want to add into this, that might be a thing for oils on top after I do the clears. So let's go ahead and move into the violets and the blues. Changing tack very slightly, we're going to put a bit of Mr. Color 183 Super Clear Gray Tone into this. When you mix it up, it's this kind of slightly dirty, almost filterish type thing that's going on here. I'm not hoping for the most drastic change, just a little bit of stuff. When the compressor wandered across the floor and then started banging up against the cabinet. Hold on. I hate when I get stuck in that chugging mode. Alright. So, where were we? Okay, so a fun thing that we can do with this, because it's so filterish, is take this cool little stencil here and kind of just vary up the stuff happening on the exhaust. Oh, fuck off, spider. See, it's a very subtle look, but once we start adding clears on top, hopefully it'll kind of pay dividends. The only problem with the stencil is there's limits to where you can get it. Now we're getting a nice sort of dirty look on these pedals, which is exactly where we want to be. I'm liking this stuff. I have to remember this when I get around to the P47 and sort of darkening up the olive drab a little bit. Alright. So, a little tiny bit more right in there, and then we're going to move on to some legit clears. How about that? A little bit more right in here. Alright, clean this out and we're going to come back with our Mr. Paint clears. Okay, so I've gone ahead and mixed up a couple of different clear mixes here. Essentially what we've got moving from left to right, this is violet mixed with a little bit of red-brown, which weirdly gives a slightly pinker look for some reason. This is blue mixed with red-brown, which gives us a sort of dirty gray. Straight up violet, blue and green, so we get the turquoise, and then straight up blue. So let's get to work. I think I'm going to start. Let's start by changing the air pressure. Alright, so I think I'm going to start with good old clear blue. And this has all been thinned pretty significantly with Mr. Leveling Thinner. I almost feel like I could use more, but we're going to try it real fast and see how it goes. Ooh. That's pretty nice. This stuff interacts wonderfully with the oils, for sure. A little while to hit all this, but I'm liking what it's doing so far. Okay, I'm going to call the blue in a pretty good place. We're going to go and swap out and go with some different shades. One thing about violet is it reacts really interesting ways with blue, so we can actually build on some effects in here with that. God damn it. All right, now we've got this sort of dirty black gray color that came from the mixture of blue and red-brown. This is good for building in a little bit of darkness and variation into things. Okay, I'm pretty happy with where the exhaust tones are looking, so I'm going to go ahead and clean out the airbrush, and then we're going to take off this tape and see what everything looks like inside. So after a staggering number of layers, the tape has finally been removed, and here is the exhaust parfait that is the result. Now, I don't have too much to say about it at this stage that hasn't already been said in the course of the videos, but I just want to note real quickly that this was one where I have never seen really a good process laid out for handling this kind of an exhaust, and figuring out how to approach this and how to think through all these steps in advance was definitely taxing, and it was one of those where it's tough to really, you can test an element here, an element there. We can pull out the Kitty Hawk and draw on it a bit with the Sakura pens and see how that goes. We can try layering a couple metallics and seeing how that goes. But bringing it all together is ultimately a bit of a leap of faith, and I think in this case it turned out pretty well. I'm not at all going to pretend that I exactly captured the look of an Su-35's exhaust, because there is no such thing as a single look to their exhaust. It's all over the place. And B, just taking the average of the various reference photos, I think what I have here is a bit more multi-hued than what you typically see. Now, if I had stuck to, all blue and whatnot, or, all types of kind of the similar blue in here, I think that would be a bit more typical, but I think what I have here is not outside the realm of plausibility. Now let's go ahead and take a quick look at the underside as well, because the underside is a good place to talk about. Holy shit. Fucking spiders, man. Now, the underside is a good place to talk about part C of the not quite capturing the full look of the exhaust, which is down in here. There is a lot more streaking and whatnot that happens. It's just getting in there and doing it in a way that is convincing. It's really challenging, so I opted for more of a generalized, darkened, and a bit heat-stained approach, which is not exactly catching in the camera, but you can see it down in there. Overall, though, this was definitely one of those kind of muddle into a plan and then really, really hope the plan works. And I think in this case, it pretty much has. I will note, however, that these are not done. There's still weathering that has to come in on top of this, so we will be doing various panel line things in the exhaust pedals. We will be putting additional oils on top of this, but they will not be heat staining colors. They will be more grime and dirt and dust and fading and things like that, which, if you look at the actual exhausts, are all over them. But for now, this is where we have landed, and it's now time to go ahead and focus on the stabilators out here.